Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Alia Anisha binti Abdullah. My metric number is H21A2941. I would like to present my part, which is data arrangement. As you can see on the slide, the following table shows the labor force by age in Kelantan. There are three types of table that can use to describe the data. The first one is frequency distribution. There are 5 steps to constructing a frequency distribution. Step 1. Decide on the number of classes. A useful way to determine the number of classes k is the 2 to the power of k rule, such that 2 power k more than n. There were 206 labor force, so n equal 206. If we try k equal 10, which means we would use 10 classes, then 2 power 10 equal 1024. It is more than 206. So the recommended number of classes is 10. Step 2 is determine the class interval or width. Class width equal maximum data entry minus minimum data entry divided number of classes. For example, 90 minus 40 equal 50 divided 10, so the class width is 5. Step 3 is set the individual class limit. The minimum data entry is convenient lower limit for the first class. To find the lower limit of the remaining 10 classes, add the class width of 5 to the lower limit of each previous class. The upper limit of the first class is 45, which is 1 less than the lower limit of the second class. The upper limit of the other classes are 45 plus 5 equal 50, and so on. Step 4 is make a tally mark for each data entry in appropriate class, such as table 1. Last but not least, step 5 is the number of tally mark for a class is the frequency for that class. Next, table 2 is relative frequency. The relative frequency is the portion or percentage of the data that falls in that class. To find the relative frequency of class, divided the frequency by the sample size. For example, 32 divided 206 equals 0.15. Last, table 3 is cumulative relative frequency. The cumulative frequency of a class is the sum of the frequency for that class and all previous class. The cumulative frequency of the last class is equal to the sample size. For example, 32 plus 33 equals 65. 65 plus 34 equals 99. And so on until we get 206 at the last classes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Anisa binti Sabri and my matrix number is H21A2946. I would like to present the graphical method on this assignment. Basically, graph has divided to two parts, which is quantitative variable data and qualitative variable data. Quantitative has histogram, frequency polygon, and OGIF, while qualitative variable data has bar chart, pie chart, and contingency table. On this assignment, we choose two graph, which is histogram and frequency polygon. For the first graph, histogram is a bar graph that represents the frequency distribution of data set. The horizontal scale is quantitative and measure the data value at the class midpoint or class boundaries, and the vertical scale measure the frequencies of the class. So, as you can see on the slide, there is a table and histogram graph. So, on the table, there is class, lower boundaries, upper boundaries, midpoint, and frequency. So, class is the number that separate classes without forming gaps between. Lower boundaries, you can get if you take the lower limits minus 0.5, and upper boundaries you can get when you take the upper limit and plus 0.5. For the midpoint is lower class plus upper class divided by 2. Then you can get midpoint. So based on the data that we calculate together on the table, we can use to make a histogram graph. So for the second graph is frequency polygon. Frequency polygon is a line graph that emphasizes the continuous change in frequency. A horizontal scale is the midpoint of the data value, and the vertical scale measures the frequencies of the class. The plot point that represent midpoint and frequency of each class and connect the point in order from left to right. So as you can see, we just use the midpoint and frequency to make the frequency polygon graph. So the highest frequency for this polygon frequency graph is from class 56 to 60, which is 35. And the lowest of the class is 76 to 60, which is just 6.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. Good day to everyone. My name is Muhammad Aiman bin Muhammad Kamil. My numeric H21A2184. For this part, I will explain the question of the number 3, which is find and explain the value, measure of central tendency, measure of variation, and measure of position. Hence, determine the shape of data distribution. For this part, I will explain the first one is measure of central tendency. Measure of central tendency is a single number that seeks to characterize a set of data by pinpointing the central location within the set of data. So, measure of central tendency have three typical methods, which is the first one is mean, and the second one is median, and the last one is mode. So, we will talk about the first method, which is mean. So, mean or average is the most popular and well-known measure of central tendency. The mean is equal to the sum of all the values in the data set divided by the number of the values in the data set. So, the sum of the labor force by age group in Kelantan 1982 until 2019 is 206. To find the mean age, we divide the sum of the labor force by age group in Kelantan by the number of the labor force by age group in the sample. After we calculate, the answer is 20.6. So we'll go to the second method, which is median. The median is the middle score of for a set of data that has been arranged in order of magnitude. When there are an odd number of data entries, the median is the value in the middle of the list. If an even number, the median is the mean of the two middle of the data entries. So this data set have 10, which is an even number. So we will take two middle of data entries, which is 20 and 23. So after we calculate the median of the labor force by age group in Kelantan in 1982 until 2019 is 21.5. So we go to the last method, which is mode. Mode is the most frequent score in our data set. The data set has no mode if no entry is repeated. If two entries occur with the same higher frequency, each entry is referred to as a mode, and the data set is referred to as B model. So after we'll calculate, the answer is 55.962. That's all from me. Thank you. Hi and Assalamualaikum. Good day to everyone. My name is Muhammad Aiman bin Muhammad Kamil. My numeric H21A2184. For this part, I will explain the question of the number 3, which is find and explain the value, measure of central tendency, measure of variation, and measure of position. Hence, determine the shape of data distribution. For this part, I will explain the first one is measure of central tendency. Measure of central tendency is a single number that seeks to characterize a set of data by pinpointing the central location within the set of data. So, measure of central tendency have three typical methods, which is the first one is mean, and the second one is median, and the last one is mode. So we will talk about the first method, which is mean. So mean or average is the most popular and well-known measure of central tendency. The mean is equal to the sum of all the values in the data set divided by the number of the values in the data set. So the sum of the labor force by age group in Kelantan 1982 until 2019 is 206. To find the mean age, we divide the sum of the labor force by age group in Kelantan by the number of the labor force by age group in the sample. After we calculate, the answer is 20.6. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Continue with me. For this part, I will explain about the measure of variation. So the measure of variation is a measure of center tendency in which some parameters attempt to explain the amount of variation among random variables. The range, the variance, and the standard deviation were always used as a parameter in the measure of variation. So the range for this data set is 50. So the range of age group of labor force for gift size in Kelantan are 50, and therefore the sample variance is about 684,772.57, while the sample standard deviation is about 827.51. Measure of position, which is the position of single value when compared to other value, is in a sample of data set is referred to as a measurement of position. The measurement is determined using three different measures of position, such as quartile, deciles, and percentiles. So for quartile, which is 51.5, class interval 56 to 50, while third quartile 155.5 and class interval 61 to 65, while the last one is interquartile range. The answer is 42.629. That's all for question number 3. That's all. Thank you. For shape of data distribution, the shape of data distribution of the labor force by age group in Kelantan 1982 until 2019 is shown below. For mean 20.6, median 21.5, while mode 55.962. So therefore it is skewed to the left. That's all. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Ali Anisha binti Abdullah. My metric number is H2182941. I would like to present my part, which is introduction to the data and variable involved. Due to its origin in an internet database, our data qualify as secondary data. The data is gathered and kept by another party. These are the data that are used and collected for various objectives. Primary as independent variable, while total as dependent variable. Thank you.
Hi, welcome back with me. So for this part, I will explain about the answer for question of number 2 for part B. So the answer for this question for this data set is N36. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad bin Abdullah. My number metric is H21A2895. Today, I will present about the question number 3, calculation of Pearson correlation. Okay, the strength of the various variables in the association is measurable by the Pearson correlation coefficient. As a result, it is always a good idea for the person conducting the analysis to compute the correlation coefficient value in order to determine how strong the association between the two variables is. And we use the formula for correlation, and the answer is R equals to negative 0.089. This is a very weak correlation at negative 0.089 between primary and total. That's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name Muhammad Izham bin Sabah Farid. Metric H21A2235. Today I went to present about the regression equation. Regression equation is used instead to find out what relationship, if any, exists between sets of data. The most thing in the real world, from gas price to horizons, can be modeled with some kind of equation. It allows us to predict future events. Formula we use like in the slide. Therefore, the estimate regression equation is y equal 1528.00 plus 19.380. That's all from me.